Ugh, this hurts. These two files are nearly identical. There are only a few differences, and my job is to find those differences. This unusual punishment is painful when done manually, but luckily, Neovim has a built-in diff tool. Neovim's diff mode lets me see the changes in files much more easily. Today I'll show you how I use diff mode, and at the end I'll give you a practical example from my day-to-day work. So let's begin. First, how exactly do I open two files in Neovim, like this, in split mode? If you've used Neovim before, you know to open a single file, I enter the command nvim and then the path to the file I want to open. Here's how I open just one file. But to open more than one file in split mode, I enter a flag, this capital O flag, and then I list all the files that I want to open. Here I want to open file 1 and file 2, and I get back to the split view I had at the beginning. Here, if I want to see the changes, I could manually go through each of the lines and see how one version changes from the other. But that's too much work. I don't want to do that. So let me quit all of these windows and open Neovim again in diff mode. To do that, I use another flag. Instead of dash capital O, I use a dash D. D for diff, or diff mode. Entering here, I get the same split mode. I have file 1 on the left and file 2 on the right. But now I have color. I can clearly see that in file 2, there's a new line called retry attempts, and that's because it's highlighted in green. And on the flip side, on the first file, I have this dash line in red, which basically indicates that there's something in the other file that's not present in this file. And if I look more closely, I'll see another kind of highlighting. There's a little bit of blue highlighting. And this indicates that there's some characters that are different between the two. Here on line 13, I have dbHost, which is equal to a string called localhost. And on the other file, dbHost is similar, but all the characters within the string, or within the quotes, are different. Looks like it's pointing to a production database. And if I go down to enable metrics, I see I used to have false in file 1, and I now have true in file 2. This is amazing. Now I can go through my file, scrolling line by line to examine my changes. Now I hear you complaining. I don't like scrolling. It's too hard to go line by line through each of these changes. Hey, listen, this is Neovim. There's a shortcut for everything. Normally in diff mode, you don't want to go through each of the lines one at a time, especially if they did not change. You want to jump to all the parts that did change. And that can be done using a shortcut or a keybind. If I type the closed square bracket and C, I'm taken to the first change in the file. Let me write that down so you can see what I'm typing. If I type close bracket and C, that will jump to the next change. Right now I can see the change is in version number. And if I type close bracket and C again, I'm taken to the port. One more time takes me to this retry attempts difference, then the log level, then this log rotation, so on and so forth. Similarly, I can type a open square bracket C, and that will jump to the previous change. And this is what I can use to go back and forth between my changes. So remember that. Close bracket C jumps to the next change. Open bracket C goes back to the previous change. Now, as I'm jumping from one change section to another, sometimes I see something in a file that I want to transfer to another file. Here I am active in file 1, and as I go from change to change, I notice, hey, there's a port of 8080 in file 1, but a port of 9090 in file 2. I can transfer this port number over to my first file by entering another keybind. If I type in DO for diff obtain, that will take whatever change is in the other version and move it over to this version. And this will transfer not just the port, it'll also transfer the max connections. This whole section is a two-line section. If I type DO, you'll quickly see that the port and the max connections have transferred over to the first file. Awesome. There's a similar keybind to push a change from your active file to another file. If I type in DEP for diff put, that will take any change that is in my current file and push it to the other. Right now, I have a log level of info in file 1. That's different than the log level in file 2. So if I type in DEP, that will transfer info over to file 2. Just for practice, I'll go over to file 2, and within file 2, I'll go to this production database and DP, or diff put, the production database over to file 1. Nice. So those are the basics. Let's see, what else is there? Well, we've talked about how we can open Neovim's diff mode from outside Neovim while on the terminal, but there is another way to open diff mode from within Neovim. Suppose that I am looking at a single file, file1, and I want to diff this against another file. Within Neovim's command line, if you look down here in the bottom left, I can enter a command called diff split, and then the name of the second file that I want to diff the current file against. I'll put in file2 and hit enter, and I'll get diff mode again, but it looks a little different. This time I have a horizontal split. The functionality is the same, it's just the style is different, and I don't like this style. I don't like the horizontal split. So instead of doing that, I'll enter a slightly different command. If I type in vert for vertical and then diff split, I can enter in again the name of the file, and I get back within Neovim to the diff mode that I had before with the vertical split. All right, how can we make this more fun? By adding more files, of course. Neovim's diff mode is not limited to comparing only 2 files. I can add up to 8 files in diff mode. But for this little terminal that's zoomed in, let's just start by looking at 3 files. I'll type in the name of the 3 files, and I'll get the same split mode, but now I have file 1, file 2, and file 3. The features with 3 files are pretty much the same, but there is a key difference. Let me show you what I mean. Here in file 2, log rotation is equal to daily, and in file 3, log rotation is equal to the exact same thing, daily. And so you might ask, why is this highlighted green? This is not a new line. And that's because when I have more than one file, Neovim will highlight a change if that file differs from at least one other file. Right now, log rotation daily does not differ from file 3, but it does differ from file 1. That line doesn't exist. Similarly, you can see that the production database is the exact same between file 2 and file 3, but it's highlighted because the string differs from file 1. There are a few other differences with more than one file. Suppose that I have this log level of info and I want to push that to file 2. I could try using dp like I did before, but Neovim will start complaining because there's more than 2 buffers in diff mode and it doesn't know if I want to push this to file 2 or to file 3. But that's okay. There's a corresponding function or command called diff put. Diff put expects just one argument. It just needs to know, hey, which file do you want to send this particular change to? I'm in file 1 and I want to send this to file 2, so I'll type in the name of file 2, and now info has been pushed or put into file 2. You're probably guessing what's going to happen if I try to pull a change into my current file. If I've tried to pull this db host in file 3 over to file 1 by typing in do, same issue. It doesn't know which buffer I'm trying to obtain from this file or from this one. And the corresponding command to explicitly say that is diff get. I'll say diff get and then tab to select the file that I want to pull from. And now the production database has been pulled over to file 1. While we're here, it's worth noting that I can have several windows open in Neovim, and some of them can be a part of diff mode and others cannot. Right now, all 3 of these windows are a part of diff mode, but I can remove one. I'm selecting file 1, and if I execute the command diff off, that will remove file 1 from diff mode, meaning only these 2 files are currently being diffed. And I get something a little bit interesting. You'll notice that I have a little bit of a fold because this entire section is no longer different from the other file. I can expand that and see that it's exactly the same. That's pretty neat. But the remaining differences, like the max connections and the retry attempts, are highlighted since those characters are different. How do I add a file back to diff mode? Well, if I go back to file 1 and execute the command diff this, file 1 will be joined back to diff mode, and I can see the color highlighting comparing all 3 files. All right, that's all you really need to know about diff mode to use it well. Let me now show you an example of how I use diff mode in day-to-day life. I work as a data engineer, which means that people love giving me files, even when it's not my birthday. Usually those files are in the format I expect, but occasionally the file format changes. Someone adds a column, someone removes a column, or a column is renamed. And of course, I'm not told. I only find out when the production pipeline breaks. But I can use Neovim's diff mode to see how the structure of 2 files has changed. Let me give you an example. Here in this directory, I have 2 CSV files representing student data. I have students1.csv and students2.csv, and the structure has changed, so I'll use diff mode to see how it's changed. The CSV file itself is small. The only thing you need to note is the first line has column names, and if I start scrolling through column names, I can see, okay, some column names have changed, maybe some have disappeared, but this is a very wide table, and it's hard to see how the highlighting of one file matches with a highlight of another file. For long lines or wide files like this, Diff mode is hard to interpret, but that's okay. I can work around that. Let's say that I take the first line, which gives me the column names, and I effectively pivot it. So instead of having a long line of column names, I have a list of column names. If I have a list for file 1 and a list of column names for file 2, I can then diff the two of those to see how the columns have changed. Let me do that. The first Unix command I'll use is head. You might know that by default, head just gives the first 10 lines in a file. I don't want the first 10 lines, I just want the first line, which gives me the column header. So I'll enter a flag called -1 to just get the first line. Next, I want to take each of these columns and put them in a separate line. And I can do that by using a translation tool. To the translation tool, I'll say, hey, anytime you see a comma in this line, I want you to translate that into a new line character. This effectively replaces the commas with a new line character, and I get this, a list of all of the columns. The last thing I'll do is save this into a file. So I'll redirect the output into a file called calls1.txt. All right, I just need to do it one more time for the second file. Now I have two files, calls1 and calls2, which give me the list of columns. You can guess what I'm doing. So I'll say Neovim Diff mode calls1 and calls2. And now I can see what happened. I can clearly see by jumping with close bracket C that the column wood or wandwood has been renamed to wandwood type. That there's another column called wand length inches that completely has been removed from the second file. And this blood status column has been renamed to the more politically correct parentage. Nice. Now, I could write a script that automatically compares the structure of these file formats for me, but for a quick ad hoc check, Neovim's diff mode is good enough. Okay, we went through a lot. If you forget the key bindings and the shortcuts from today, you can go to the blog post that goes with this video. At the bottom, there's a cheat sheet with all the commands and key bindings for Neovim's diff mode. Until next time, happy coding.